Welcome to Going In Blind. I'm your host, Zach Tidwell, and this week's intro is probably going to be one of the shortest ones that I've had on this show because I don't want to give any information away or speak out of turn here. So, my guest this week is Alexis Arralynn. She is a Doomsday cult survivor, and she's made some pretty big changes in her life and specifically taking control of it in a way that I think is very admirable and very important for people to hear. So, of course, we're going to spend time on her story like we always do and probably dig very deep. I expect there to be a lot of rabbit holes on this one and also just hopefully an uplifting ending with it all, too. So I'm excited, as always, to get into all of that. But before we do, just a couple quick announcements. You guys that have been listening for a while know that there is a pretty wild backstory behind this podcast. Those of you who are new to the show do not know that. So to get some context as to what that is, head over to my website at zachtidwell.com and you can read a little bit about it there. And if that interests you, you can also reach out to me for speaking engagements and all sorts of other things. I've got a lot going on, and you can also join my mailing list there to get updates about two big projects that I have going on behind the scenes as I have news to share on them that will include deals and stuff like that in the future for pre-ordering when those things are coming to market. But I will leave it at that for now because I want to dig into all of this. So, Alexis, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me on the show. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm going to very gracefully, very, very gracefully step into this. How did you end up in a doomsday cult?
Well, that's kind of a good question because, uh, first of all, I was born into it. My parents followed it. They were both raised, they had very Christian backgrounds, but after they met and after the sort of Jesus radically saved movement came along in like the 70s and the 80s, they began to take more of a fundamental approach. And so they began searching for churches that were more supportive of their fundamentalism, I guess you could say. So I wasn't born because my parents wanted a child and wanted one to love. I was born as to be a living sacrifice to this order. I was born as a servant. In fact, I began serving people when I was 2 years old on stage, still in diapers, singing songs about this God while everyone had their eyes on me. And that was my earliest memory was doing that. So that's kind of how it started.
That's actually, I had assumed that was the case based off of what I had read about you, and I was very interested to speak with you for all the reasons that I already mentioned in the introduction, but also this is a different. I feel like most cult survivors that you hear from entered it on their own behalf and at a time when they were very vulnerable and maybe manipulated or just taken advantage of, or just very because they were so lost or things were so destitute that they were so vulnerable that somehow they ended up there through their own bad decisions. And I had gotten the impression that you were born into it. So it's morbidly, I think, kind of fascinating to me. I think on one
Yeah.
hand, yeah, I think on one hand, trying to consider what the psychology of your parents was like. So I think before we get into or follow farther down this thread, I do want to step back. And so the radically saved movement, do you have enough knowledge of it to explain kind of what that was and set the stage for how your parents ended up there more? Because I am, again, kind of morbidly curious about this.
Right. Well, I think in any religious movement, it can have sort of like flares when it becomes more popularized or a certain event might kick off uh, something. But the way that I was raised, it was very fear induced. So it was very much like Jesus is coming back. You must be ready. You must be pure of heart. You must not have any sin in your heart. And so it was fear based. And so people were drawn to it that way because they were afraid of the afterlife and what was waiting for them if they didn't live their life the way that this God had wanted them to. And so there was a lot of pressure to perform. And so not everyone, I mean, some people got into it because they were looking for love. They were searching for something. They were searching for guidance, direction. They didn't have parents to, tell them where to go in life. Or maybe they just were with friends and their friends were like, hey, come to church. There were all kinds of ways that people joined this belief. People walked around with tracts and handed them out, and people had potlucks and they would invite their neighbors. It was all under the illusion of being welcomed and loved and being a part of a group. So no matter how people kind of became a part of it, it just became really kind of gigantic. And there was also the quote unquote satanic panic of the
Yeah.
70s and 80s, which I think brought a lot of people back to church, again, out of fear, because they wanted to feel safe and they felt that that belief gave them some sort of covering.
Yeah, and it's interesting because that was also, I don't know, I know what the satanic panic is, but I don't know enough about it to know if these things are actually intertwined. But that, there was a very kind of as the federal government made the sweeping, Schedule One narcotics legislation and in response to trying to shut down, the hippie culture and the kind
Right.
of counterculture revolution. It seems like this was the pendulum swinging in the other direction a little bit to me. Like,
Yeah. And I lived in Los Angeles, so I was kind of in the middle of all of this gang rivalry and stuff that already existed. And where I grew up, there was a church on every corner of every
Mhm.
kind of denomination. So I really feel like I was kind of in a melting pot of a lot of faiths and beliefs, but I was being taught that mine was the only one, the right one, and that was the one you had to follow, you
Yeah,
know.
that's that's a thing that I struggle with religions. Not, it's I like the messaging behind, the ideas behind living a value-based life and doing the right thing and taking care of other people and, not doing horrendous things. But it's particularly when people get involved, that gets very messy because then you get, whether it's a cult leader or even just people, a rogue priest that's taking advantage of his position in a typical church that is where the church is not an issue. It is that individual. Like it gets very messy very quick. And it's
Mhm.
especially it's weird to me that like everyone thinks that they have the answer and where this is the only answer. And then there's more going on there, I feel like, than just being the beliefs, because I feel like I feel like if religions were entirely pure and based on and again, I separating the beliefs from the values of the religion from the pushing the marketing side of it, where this is the one and true religion and everyone
Mhm.
else is fucked kind of thing. I think
Right.
I don't know. I have a problem with that, I guess,
Yeah.
because
It does get complicated because, you've got people, seeking God and seeking the faith because they want direction. But wherever you have people like that, there's other people willing to take advantage of those people.
yeah. And wouldn't, in an ideal world, if a church was purely centered on or focused on just the values there, and the even though they are intertwined with the unique beliefs of, okay, Jesus is the Son of God and will be the second coming and things like that. It's I feel like that should still be it should just be happy that other people of other religions are also seeking some higher form of meaning, and also following in good guidelines, even though it's not the same exact belief system, but the tenets of living a good life are good. So
Mhm.
it's just this weird, messy thing to me. And fear is always a bad way,
Yeah.
it's a bad way to lead. Like, when you talked with your, I guess maybe you never had this conversation with your parents. Were they led there through fear?
That's a good question. Because I believe that my parents each individually had their own sort of motives. They were very different in the way that they behaved. They were very different in the way that they lived out their faith. And for example, my mother, she was very preachy, but she was also very critical. And she was also hypocritical, and she didn't follow what she preached. She didn't practice what she preached. My dad tried to, and I believe that my dad was a good person, even though he yelled and screamed at us and he, abused us physically because, that was what his religion taught us to. I believe at my dad's core, he was actually a very more forward thinking, more democratic of a type of person. He was more focused on those caring things and the good side of things, the community, singing songs together and things like that. My mother was more on the control side of things. She always wanted to know what was going on in everyone's lives and how to use it for her benefit. And my father, he just would work hard all day, come home and want to watch Star Trek, which I thought was, pretty funny as a Christian kid. Like, I was like, wow, does my dad, I wonder if my dad believes more in Star Trek than he does about Christianity, because it just seemed like my parents didn't have the same idea about that, even though as a family, they were definitely in unison in their discipline with us, for sure.
That's so it's interesting, and I think that kind of speaks to the human nature almost, where like, even like your mom is, or maybe conveys that the role of human nature there, the different, like, where someone might begin to manipulate something, like your mom might be, where she's under the guise of being holier than thou is getting into everyone else's business and what are her
Yeah.
real motivations there. And it's
Uh-huh.
also interesting because I've seen, some very I've seen people that I'm not, I guess, personally familiar with, but communicating about what seems to me is very, very fundamental beliefs where, like, okay, a video game or maybe a show like Star Trek, because there's aliens in it and things like that, that is demonic. And so
Right.
the juxtaposition there of your parents leaning that far into it, but then having that is just, it's funny, but
It is funny.
yeah.
I'm still trying to decipher some of it.
Yeah. So when you're 2 years old and having these first memories, like,
Mhm.
were you guys living on a compound somewhere? Were they entirely separated from all of their family and their former friends by that point, like you typically see in cults?
It wasn't super isolating. We were kind of one of those cults that kind of existed, that acted normal, looked normal. I mean, I still wore long dresses and things like that, but I didn't look too abnormal. I still wore jeans and played with the kids outside. So I didn't,
Okay.
I was allowed to have friends in the neighborhood, but my mother definitely put limits on me. I was only allowed to spend time with specific people of specific colors of skin or specific religions or beliefs. So I definitely wasn't free to be friends with whoever I wanted. So there definitely was some limitations. And other than the neighborhood kids, everything else that I did was connected to the religion. I was homeschooled. So that was a way I was isolated, is that I was homeschooled. I wasn't allowed to go to school with the other kids or know what they were being taught. I didn't even know that they had counselors in school and you could just get up and go see a counselor if you needed. I didn't even know that they had that until my kids were in school and public
Whoa.
school. Yeah. So that was a big kind of shock to me. I was like, oh, that makes sense. Because my mother was very against counseling and mental health. And I believe that that was one reason she kept me out of school. It
Mm.
wasn't just so that she could homeschool me and let me explore my own uh, interests or because she didn't like the public school system. She really didn't want me to talk about the cult. She didn't really want me to talk about the problems that were going on just in our household. She didn't want me talking about her family side of things. Just my mom, I guess she always knew I was a talker. Turned out to be true. um, and so she really did limit me socially. As I got older, I started to notice when she started to manipulate my friendships. Back when you didn't have cell phones, you had house phones. So if I wasn't home and someone called for me and wanted to spend time with me, she could just say whatever she wanted, be like, oh, she doesn't really want to see you anymore. Or
Mm.
she could be like, oh, she's not home, or she's too sick, and I would be upstairs not knowing anyone to call. She would do things like
Yeah.
that. So yeah, very manipulative. It was very confusing growing up. Uh, I'm trailing off a little bit, I think.
No, you're fine. I know this is perfect. Oh, do you think, or I guess, do you know, did she have a childhood where she was very powerless?
Oh yes, my
Okay.
mom was definitely. She grew up on a farm, uh, in a very rural part of Minnesota. She had stories about not having indoor plumbing until she was 13 years old, or electricity. So my mom grew up very much like in the 19th century. My mother had a very different upbringing than I did, being raised in Los Angeles, right in the middle of the Rodney King trials and everything. That was very different disconnect, very big disconnect between my mother and I. Um, but the whole powerless thing does come into play. My mother was very open with me about uh, abuse that she had experienced, specifically sexual abuse that she'd experienced. And she made it a point to tell me that you should never tell your mother if something like that happens to you because it would hurt your mother.
Wow.
So, yeah, so she never told her mother, and she made sure that I was never supposed to tell her if anything like that happened. And if I did tell her, she would ignore me. So that was an area my mother couldn't touch because of her own shame. And because of that, I suffered a lot because of that. I grew up knowing my mother was not going to advocate for me. And that was really hard.
Yeah, that just recreates, and it's interesting because that sounds like she was aware of it, and she literally, it was to the idea of having to face her own daughter going through that would bring up such grief in herself, and that she wanted nothing to do with it and just act
Yeah,
like it
she
was
would
nothing
just,
going on.
yeah, she would totally abandon me in those situations. And you hurt when you're young, but when you're older and you're like, God, she must have been so hurt where she had to completely ignore her own child. She couldn't even take care of her own child, being reminded of that, and that just hurt me, knowing that my mother felt that she had nobody to go to. And I wonder what her mother said. I wonder why she didn't feel like she could go to her mother. And
Yeah.
sometimes it makes me wonder if if her mother maybe knew, you know? And so I have all these unanswered questions, myself, about my mother and how her situations where she felt powerless affected me.
Yeah, and I think everyone's probably heard of abuse perpetuating. I mean, I've talked about it on the show with people before, and specifically a woman named Raylene Weaver who worked with teen sex offenders. Um, but it's come up in other discussions on here too, and I think everyone has heard that's a very common thread with abusers, is that they were once abused. But I don't think I've ever heard of the reverse happening, where it's the victim perpetuates that environment to at least create a vulnerable environment for that to potentially happen. Obviously, that happens in cult a lot, but with her, because of her own experiences, then wanting not to protect her own kids from it.
Yeah, and I think it was also her way of communicating to me that that is an unspoken thing. That is what women are for.
Uh,
And so that really set me up for future issues of people just thinking they could take advantage, and then my mother not even acknowledging it.
that is fucking dark.
No. Yeah, it is really dark. It got pretty obvious to me even when I was 14. My mother, this one story that happened when I was 14 years old. My dad he worked during the day. I grew up singing on stage. That's a whole big, huge part of my life that I don't really talk a whole lot. I haven't really mentioned that a whole lot, but that's how I started, was singing with my family. We were musical ministers, so we sang. That was our bit. We didn't preach. We just sang, and people gave us money sometimes. That was what we did. And there was this one instance where I was 14 and my mother had told me, there's someone who is interested in your music and might want to, promote you as a singer or something like that. And me, I'm 14. I'm thinking, oh, really? You know, that's cool. And so my mom told me, he's going to come over actually this afternoon. So why don't you go put on your red velvet dress that she bought for me, which is crazy because it didn't look like anything else that she had bought me. But she did buy me this really short, skimpy red velvet dress, and she had me put that on. And this guy came over, and it happened to be a guy that worked with my dad. And but when he came in, he kind of felt funny. I'm watching this guy and I'm watching my mom talk with him. Um, it's a bit of a backstory. I have an older sister who also sang. And so what had happened is that he was given CDs of my older sister singing and was lured into thinking he was going to get a date with my older adult sister when it really was 14-year-old me.
Uh,
And my mom thought this guy wouldn't put it together and wouldn't care and would just take me anyway. But when he looked at me and asked me how old I was, I said, I'm 14. And he said, I'm not doing this. And he set the CD down and left the house. And I looked at my mom and I was like, what was that all about? And my mom was like, I don't know, she just fed me bullshit. Oh, I don't know what's wrong with you. And I was like, this is weird, man. This is weird. I really felt like my mom was really covertly trying to traffic me.
yeah.
But using the religion, using whoever she knew. Because these were songs that we sang. We were singing songs about God. These weren't lovey-dovey, jazzy songs. These were religious songs. So I don't know what her plan was or what she was trying to do, but it was very weird. And I really, at 14, I was like, something's wrong with my mother, I think.
Yeah, she tried to pimp you out. Oh,
Yeah.
do you
And
think
the
that
guy
was?
ran away.
Oh, thank God. But fuck,
Yeah.
do you think it was money? Like what? I mean, that steps outside of the bounds of turning a blind eye. That steps outside of the bounds of this is a religious thing. Like, what?
Yeah. And that's another perfect question because I always wondered, was there money involved? And then, but then it's like I go back to my mother reminding me why I was born. I was born to be a living sacrifice. I was born to serve others. I was born to do this. So she had me, she would place me in wherever she thought I should serve. I have no clue as to what her motive was still to this day. I have no reason why she chose that man from my dad's work. And I have no idea why he was so freaked out and just turned around and left. Like it seemed like he thought he was walking into an adult situation and it
Yeah.
was not that. And so there is just so many unanswered questions I still have, but that is what happened and that felt weird. And And sometimes I wondered, does my mom just want something bad to happen to me? I felt like I started to pay closer attention when all of these little intrigues would happen, or these little meetups would happen. Um, or she began to take me over at other people's homes and kind of like go out of town. And then, but these people, they had teenage boys that were very curious and had been messing with their sisters, and they weren't allowed to do that anymore. So, yeah, let's
Oh,
bring her over.
God damn.
And these were people in the church. So, of course, you couldn't say anything. You couldn't do anything because it didn't matter if you said or did anything. Nobody was going to care. They're like, oh, that's them. They're gross. And yeah. So it was just, and it wasn't like I was full on raped by these people. It wasn't like I was, violently assaulted, but they definitely did molest me. They definitely did mess with me. They definitely took advantage. And my mother was definitely an enabler to that, for sure.
And I I have a bunch more questions that I want to
Yeah.
ask even down this thread, but I don't want to skip so much.
Sure.
So I know I'm the one who led us down this path. So like that is not
No
me
worries.
commenting on you. This is I'm gonna bring it back because you came back to that term, that idea of being a living sacrifice and the servant, and that's kind of where you started when you were talking about your first memories of being on stage. I mean, we've kind of gotten some insight into what your parents were like, but what else, and even what your experience was with schooling, but I still don't have a clear picture on the. It's interesting that you guys were not entirely segregated from the rest of society. So, like, what else was
Yeah.
life like? How did all of that develop over time in between being homeschooled and being a 14-year-old?
Being groomed for marriage. So, but by the time I was 14, I had already done a very extensive course in the purity culture movement, the purity commitment. I had already studied for 2 years and had went to cult conferences and classes and had actual homework that went right along with my Bible. And I signed a covenant. And I even got a purity ring that I was already wearing on my ring finger by the time I was 14 years old. In fact, all that was done by the time I was 13. So in my head, I was preparing for marriage. That's what I had been prepared for. I was already taught that, yeah, you're here for everyone to look at you and to look pretty and to smile and sing. Now we're going to turn you into a wife now. So you're going to, stay pure. You're not going to go on dates. You're not going to uh, go to parties. You're not going to be this place by yourself. You're not, no, 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 no. But I also kind of adopted that because at that age, I was trying to live my faith, you know, with intent because I was already wrapped up in that myself, and I was afraid of going to hell and all those things. I By then I'd already had nightmares. I had nightmares my whole life. That was probably something else I didn't mention, was that since it started I had nightmares. Ever since I couldn't remember a time where I didn't have nightmares until years after when I left. So the cult and the indoctrination, being homeschooled in it, it was God this. Everything that you said, everything you ate, everything you wore, every activity you did had to do with God. It was so by the time I was 13, 14, I was ready to be a wife. I was ready to have babies and marry the person that God had for me. And so I mean, I was homeschooled. So every single subject we had, you had to memorize a part of scripture with it every single week. Think
Mm.
about how many subjects you have in a day.
Yeah.
There was a Bible verse attached to every single one. So I was learning an average of 7 Bible verses a day, and that was just for school. That didn't even include church. It didn't even include all of the extra plays that I was in to tell people about the faith and to try to bring them in. Uh, I was a machine. I was a memorizing machine. I'm also autistic. That had a lot to do with it, But some people thought I was possessed, so that's another rabbit hole.
Oh, that's
I've
fun.
actually had exorcisms done on me. That would happen when I was about 15.
Wow.
Skipping a little ahead there, but yeah. So it's hard to give a clear picture because there isn't one. It's like the more you get, the more clarity I try to get, the more confusion you're going to get. More like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. That's weird.
Yeah.
That's insane. Um, but yeah, I was a memorization machine. I would memorize huge passages of scripture. So by the time I was 14, I was not only ready to be a wife, I was a professional minister. I was a professional Christian. I was the spokesperson. I was the one that everybody called to have sing or to have read a Bible verse or to pray. All eyes went to me, and I didn't understand that part. That I just assumed that my parents kept telling me that's what I was born for, so I just kept doing it.
And your dad, obviously, I mean, if a guy from his work was invited over, and even you just said parents were telling you that, this is what you're for, like he was at the very least complicit through his inaction, because it sounds like he had to have known.
Yeah, and that's where it gets a little bit hazy because I honestly think my mom manipulated my dad. I don't think my dad had any there was no sexual abuse between my dad and I. My dad had sexual abuse and he was abused and he went the completely opposite way. He didn't do that like to any of us uh at all. And so I think if my dad actually knew what my mom had intended to do, I think he would have said something. I just think my mom set this thing up and he expected to see my older sister and really it was just me there. And I don't even think my dad knew that my mom did that, to tell you the truth. But he did have this friend at work and he did, say, oh yeah, he's going to come over and pick up a CD or something. That's what my dad's story was. So I don't know, man.
Yeah.
Again, there's still a lot of unanswered questions that I have as far as my dad, as to what he knew, because one of the reasons why I'm estranged from my father now is because he refused to listen to me when I would tell him about things my mother did. He didn't want to hear it. So I think that either my dad knew and didn't want to be confronted, or he really just didn't want to know.
Oh, yeah, either way,
Yeah.
you can't absolve him of responsibility there. Like
Right.
that's
Right.
still,
Exactly.
it's not predatory, I guess, but it's still malicious. It's
Yeah.
malicious ignorance. Yeah.
Right. And anytime a man was bothering me or someone was stalking me or harassing me or following me around, my dad turned he turned a blind eye. He left and walked the room. He would leave. He didn't hear it. And I'm just like, I'm telling my father that this boy is bothering me. And he just turned around and left the room.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Okay.
that's the kind of man my father was. Uh Yay, dad.
Yeah. Can, I guess, as we step through into this, and even because you mentioned the estrangement, um, and because this is, as I expected it to be, a bit of a, like, Medusa's head as
Yeah.
kind of debauchery.
Really curly hair too.
Yeah. I'm sure that probably helped with the n- the messaging of, yeah, she needs an exorcism. She look at her, she looks like Medusa. But um
It's
with
crazy.
yeah,
Yeah.
with, I guess, on one, I want to know what this cult was called, and then two, can you explain, because it seems
A lot of people don't consider it a cult because it's a form of Christianity. But
okay,
there's a
so
lot
there
of
was,
forms of Christianity.
yeah.
And what makes it a cult, you can be going to any church on the corner. One of them could be a cult. One of them could just be a church you go to on Sundays. Another one could be a cult. A cult, if you look up the definition of cult, I mean, you can actually like read what it says. You're not allowed to have a choice some cults will make you pay money into it. They make you give your tithes, your offering. And if you don't, there's consequences for that. You can lose your membership. You can lose all the help that you get. For example, the order, all your finances, all your assets are wrapped up in the cult, and they do like a collective sort of redistributing of goods. But if you're not following what they want you to do, you're not going to get those goods. You're not going to have access. They're not going to take care of you. So my parents basically would go to any church that had that sort of setup, that had that sort of dominance, that was like, this is the way, this is the truth, this is the light, we're the one true church. Everybody else, their doctrine's wrong, blah, blah, blah. You guys need to do this. You have to live this way. There's no, oh, pray about it and see where God leads you.
Yeah.
There's no there's no appreciating anybody for who they are. You have to be who they want you to be. You have to do what they want you to do, and if you don't, there's severe consequences for that.
And because to me, off of what's been said so far and following in line with that definition, it seems like your family was the cult. So were they also,
Yes.
were they also under those same kind of constraints, or was it this literally a function of your family and their beliefs?
Well, something I may not have mentioned is that my mother is covert narcissistic personality disorder. She cannot respect boundaries. She is very sadistic. And when you have a narcissistic person for a leader, your life becomes very cult-like. It becomes about whatever pleases them, whatever makes them happy. For example, she was supposed to be homeschooling me, but while I was being homeschooled and memorizing my Bible verses like a good little Christian girl, my mom was on the phone with her brother who had murdered his wife and was incarcerated for that. And she was doing everything she could to justify what she did. And I had to listen to that all the time. She forced me to speak to him even. And she would use this man and what he did to entice fear and to control me, thinking, well, he's going to get out of jail. If he gets out of jail, he could just come do the same thing to you.
Yeah, and probably she deserved it. She wasn't doing her manly duties.
Yep. Yeah. I had to listen instead of mourning the death of my aunt. I had to listen to my mother demonize her, make up stories about her, say terrible things about her. And I had to talk to the person who ended her life and destroyed my cousins' lives.
Do you think
Every day? That was just one thing she used to weaponize. That's something that, culty leaders do. They use people who do very, very bad things to control the people who are not that way.
Yeah, that's any sort of dictatorship, which a cult is. And
yes.
So it really was more of her being the cult leader.
Yeah, she was very much the cult leader, very much put on an act that my father was the leader, because in Christianity that the father is the head of the household. He makes the final decisions. But also, like, in Greek terminology, the woman's the head. She's the one that manipulates everything. That was my mother. We're not Greek, but that was definitely my mother. My mother, she controlled whatever information went in the house and whatever information went out of the house. My mother specifically coached us every day not to speak of our beliefs to non-believers, and we were taught to not speak to believers about the murder in the family, and to not tell. And we were also told that everyone wanted to be us, and everyone was jealous of us, and everyone was angry at us and was out to get us and hated us. And really, they just probably didn't like how my mother was acting.
Yeah. On one hand, your dad seemed like a weak man. To do you think your mother was in love with your uncle?
I honestly could say that I believe that there was definitely a lot of sexual abuse going on, which is why my mother never felt that she could tell her mother, which is why she specifically told me not to, because I think that it was enabled. And my mom, when this particular uncle was born, my mom, they treated her like she was that was her baby. My mom was one of 7 kids. She was number 3 out of the family, and she was the first girl. So she helped raise all the babies after that, and he was the youngest. And so they would always say, "Oh, that's her baby." So she had a very unhealthy relationship with this brother of hers. They had parentified her, first of all, and that was her child, that was her baby that she took care of and that she carried, and she changed the diapers and she fed and she, carried around while she did her chores on the farm, basically. So my mother had a very strong, unnatural sense of protection over this person. And it got to the point where it didn't matter what he did. She was willing to defend him no matter what. And it didn't matter for her, us. And that is the kind of person my mother was. And that's just one example of using
Yeah.
this person to control the family.
Yeah. And I had assumed that your aunt was her sister and the
Oh, no,
uncle was her
sorry.
marriage. No,
No,
that's
it was her brother. Her
ah,
brother, yeah, murdered his wife while my cousins were upstairs watching Saturday morning cartoons, like I had done with them 100 times. So
wow.
it felt like I had been there. And just the year before that, he had shot a bear that had come into the house, and he had shot the bear the same exact way. And so, and I had all this trauma from that, and I had all this grief from that. And my mother told me every day, never, ever, 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 ever to tell anyone that because she was supporting him. That's why
Yeah.
she didn't want anyone to know what type
Yeah.
of person she knew who she was. My mother knew who she
Obviously.
was.
Yeah. Very obvious through her actions. Like there was no weirdness where she had convinced herself that she was doing the right thing. She knew that she wasn't,
Yeah, she knew
which
she was not.
is very evil
Yeah.
sounding. Yeah.
Mhm.
It
Yeah,
so
and there's another whole like element to that. My older sister had disclosed to me now years after he'd been incarcerated. I think I was maybe 17, and I remember I was in the car with my sister, and she started randomly spilling all this stuff about him and how he had molested her when she was a kid. So yeah, I definitely know that there was a lot of that going on, and that my mom was sort of an initiator of that or an enabler of that because she, for some reason, thought that that was our purpose, I guess, which is very sad.
gosh. Yeah, thank God he was in prison later on because who knows what else you would have been forced into with him. Like that's a
He's
weird.
actually out now, but I'm an adult. So,
Yeah.
yeah, if I ever did come face to face with him, I would definitely have a few things to say.
So yeah, as you know, we've kind of talked about when you were talked about the dynamics when you were younger, also 14 and 15-ish. Like at what point, and you've also already touched on the fact that you're estranged from your family now. When did you start, I guess, when did the separation occur and when did you start realizing that whatever this dynamic going on is or was the manipulation that it is?
Well, I mean, initially I officially left in my 30s, but in abusive relationships, sometimes you try and leave lots of times, but then you keep going back. You don't realize that's what you're doing. You just think, "Oh, I just need a break from them." But the first time I left my family, I was 17. I told my mom I wanted to go to my sister's house for the summer. My sister's 14 years older than me. So she was already married, had a kid, had her own house, and I was like, "I'm going to go spend the summer with my sister." But then I just decided, well, I'm turning 18 in September and I'm just not going to go back.
Was
So
she in a fundamental relationship too?
my sister, who my sister had her own thing going on, and this other weird, very spirit filled, speaking in tongues, slain in the spirit type of thing, much crazier, like up 10 more notches. And she had me getting involved in that.
Was she the
That's a whole
Annabelle?
other. No, she wasn't, but she was a music minister in that. as bum. That's what our family did. We manipulated people with music. That's what my family did. And so I was trying to get away from my mother, thinking my mother was like the core central issue. But my sister was like still in the cult. And so she was trying to push me kind of more into it. At that point, when I was 17, I wasn't thinking that I was ever going to leave that at that at that point.
Mhm.
I hadn't broken up, but I was starting to see everything like in small pieces. And I started to try to cut people off, cut certain things off. And it wasn't until I was in my 30s that I realized I gotta chuck it all. It's all bad. My sister's also abusive. My father doesn't care. Like these people are not healthy for my kids. This religion is bogus. I did a lot of work. I studied it. I studied it so much. They kept saying, read your Bible, read this, read this book that goes with the text, and read this and read this will twist the Bible in the way that you need it to be twisted for you to do what we want you to do. And I read it so much, I became an atheist, and that's what happened. And so ultimately, I just put my big girl boots on and I made a decision. I was like, either I go with this, like I've always been taught, even though it makes me feel bad, even though it hurts me, even though it's not good for me. If I can either choose to believe in it because I'm afraid of going to hell, or I can chuck it all and risk it all and live a life that's good for me and that's healthy for me, a life that my kids can watch and be proud of and know that's how I'm going to do it.
And because you mentioned the cult again, obviously, if your sister's 14 years older than you, she's an adult out on her own, and she was living separately from your family. So what is the name of this organization? It sounds like your mom was not actually the head of it, or
Well, like I said, my parents just kind of went to whatever group kind of tolerated their doctrine.
yeah.
So one of the churches was Florence Avenue Foursquare Church. That's in Santa Fe Springs, California. It's a big multi-campus church, lots of money, lots of lawsuits that's been swept under the rug, lots of abuse that hasn't been talked about publicly. They love to abuse people, use people, and pay people off. They use money to manipulate things. Another church and organization was called the Assembly of God. There's some very culty things, but the Florence Avenue Foursquare Church, that's of the Foursquare denomination. That was founded by Amy Semple McPherson, a female actually,
Mhm.
founded that religion. But most people would be surprised to know that a woman who founded a breakoff of a Christian organization was actually like not a very good person at all.
Yeah.
If you go and look up about her and about their beliefs, when we got to college age in this church, their rule was at their Bible college was that you weren't allowed to go to the movies, you weren't allowed to dance, you weren't allowed to smoke, you weren't allowed to have a drink, you weren't allowed to date really. And most of the time it was like the whole joke was get a ring by spring. They just wanted you to get engaged. They didn't want you actually getting to know anybody. They just wanted somebody to be like, oh, God wants me to, marry you or whatever. And then you have a ring. I had a ring by January and I didn't even go to that school.
Sounds
That's
like
how intense
BYU.
it was.
What?
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, Marvin.
Happy
Just say
everybody. Yeah.
just these are jokes, but yeah, kind of. But
Right.
uh, no, it's
They're
wow.
funny.
So it's weird because it really is. I've already used the Medusa thing, but dear God, it is just like a rat's nest of
Uh-huh.
weird.
Yeah, and getting married that young, getting married without really knowing who you are, getting married without knowing who your spouse is, it's going to cause you a lot of physical problems that you won't be able to put two and two together. And I didn't know that a lot of my physical problems were due to long-term stress and anxiety because I was forced to live a life that wasn't mine. I was forced to be somebody that I wasn't naturally, and I was forced to serve other people. I'd been cooking, cleaning, changing diapers. I've been taking care of kids since I was 11 years old. I've been taking care of myself since I was 7 years old because I tried to tell somebody about the abuse at home, and my mother found out about it and stopped taking care of me as her retaliation. And so, her 7-year old me sitting on a bar stool over a gas stove trying to make a grilled cheese sandwich with a cast iron pan because my mom didn't want to take care of me anymore. So I had already been neglected like really, really young. And by the time I was in my 30s, I was like, why am I just letting everybody tell me? I was like, everybody's abandoning me. Why do I have to do what they say? Why do I have to listen to these people who have done nothing but set me up to be hurt? And so I was like, that's enough for me to leave a fate. I don't even think God has anything to do with that. I don't want any part of people like that. So I just got mad and I started to see the negative effects that it was having on my children because I left the faith when I was in my 30s. I thought that going to a non-denominational church would be better. But a non-denominational church, actually anything goes. So it could be worse. If you think that a non-denominational church is a step out of your faith, think again. That was not the case for me. It was worse. They turned up the misogyny. I was a worship pastor, but I wasn't even allowed to pick my own songs anymore. So basically I was just told to sing, this is what you sing, this is what you say, and do not pray, do not preach, do not say anything else. You're a woman, you're not allowed to talk.
Don't you think that's well, I guess on one hand, was that just one non-denominational church? Because that sounds to me
Yeah.
like that was just a manipulative fuck at the head of that church.
But the problem with the whole religion is that that is how it is at its core. You have God, then you have the husband, then you have the wife and the children. Everything comes underneath the man. So you're not actually hearing from God. And as a woman, you're told you don't hear from God. God's supposed to speak to your husband, which is why they want to marry you off early, because they want to make sure that a man is there telling you what to do at all times.
You're not an independent thinker.
Yeah, you're not allowed. I mean, I remember after I left, opening my closet, I would give me panic attacks because I can even get emotional about this. Like it really did affect me that bad where I was afraid to pick out my own clothes and what I was going to wear that day because whatever I wore was a reflection of what I believed. And so I was afraid, well, do I wear my turtleneck or do I wear my spaghetti strap dress? Today I wore both. But
An interesting choice.
right. Yeah. Yeah, it's winter. I'm wearing, but I don't have anxiety about it anymore, right? I can wear it without, crying about that. But it used to give me serious anxiety. Do I wear heels or do I wear tennis shoes?
So you
Do I wear chains or do I wear a skirt? Yeah.
do you have doubles of all these on? Do you have tennis jeans and a skirt and
Double bra, double underwear, double socks for sure. I live in the Northwest, so yeah.
I'm in Colorado, just got back from a ski trip, so
All right.
yeah, okay. That's
I
funny.
got the Paul's Bow jacket. That's my favorite ski jacket. I love it.
So
Anyway,
a year it sounds like you I guess two-part question.
yeah.
Sounds like you were married and it sounds like you went to college underneath. It was literally like that church's college.
Actually, I didn't go because my parents didn't want to pay for it. But but I did meet my husband there.
Okay.
Yeah, so he went there
Mm.
and that's where we met. And again, in the beginning, I did not want to date anybody. I did not want to see anybody. I was singing, I was doing my own thing. I was trying to write my own music and I was trying to do my own thing. And in LA, I was singing at coffee shops and I was doing some church stuff, but I was also doing some mainstream stuff that was considered very dangerous, according to my mother.
Yeah.
Um, but I met him because a friend in the church, in the cult, basically insisted that we meet each other. And I kept saying, I don't, or she tried to get him to audition for my band because I was, excuse me, give me a second. I was, um, I was looking for a bass player and he happened to play bass and she was trying to get him to audition for my band. And I kept telling her, no, I know he's just trying to get his foot in the door with me. I know he just wants to date me. I'm not interested. But ultimately she kind of lied to us both and forced us to meet each other and hang out. And then
Oh.
That was the only person who had ever really given me much positive attention. At that point, I was only nine. I just turned 20.
Okay.
Just turned 20 years old and met this guy. And we dated for 19 days and he asked. And then he
Holy hell.
stupidly said yes. You know, it was one of those. Yeah, it happens very, very fast in
Wow.
these groups. Yeah, very fast. 19
19
days.
days. Yeah, that's got to be a record somewhere.
Yeah, we
Like,
were engaged for a year. We stayed engaged for a year because, we wanted people to know that we were serious. So, yeah, even though it did happen fast, and we were serious and planned our own wedding and got married and, yeah, baby makes three, all that. But that was a whole other world that I was, raised to be a slave to, that I, signed my life into.
so did
Totally.
you, yeah, did you also, when you left the cult at 30, is that when you left him?
Uh, I was I was in my mid 30s and I started to break away from the church first because I was having so many physical problems. I was still having nightmares like I had since I was for as long as I could remember. I'd always had nightmares. I had long-term sleep deprivation issues like caused by long-term sleep deprivation. I had generalized anxiety. I was having stress-induced seizures, not grand mal seizures, but seizures that would stop me in my tracks for sure and that were brought on by stress. And so my doctor kept saying, you need to reduce your stress. You need to reduce your stress. So I'm like, okay, I'm not going to talk to my mom anymore. I'm not going to talk to my sister. I just kept cutting things out because until I felt better and eventually got to my marriage, which was hard. It wasn't like we didn't love each other, but the life that the person he wanted me to be and the person that God wanted me to be in the marriage was somebody I couldn't be. And that hurt a lot of people that, oh, we raised her so well and she can't do it. That
Yeah, we
was
raised her to
usually the
be
thing.
so obedient, and now she's not.
Yeah, she's a failure.
Yeah. It's a hard road to
Yeah.
cross when your husband wants you to wear a jeans skirt, but you want to wear a spaghetti strap dress with a turtleneck.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that is,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's a whole, yeah. And our marriage was also very culty too. I didn't have any financial freedom at all. He smashed my car, I think, in the first marriage or the first year of our marriage, just to make sure I didn't have a place to go or go anywhere. So he just would systemically trap me, or make sure that I didn't have any way of communicating with anybody. He always got the new iPhones. I always had to wait. He would buy me gifts to give to me in front of everyone, but then a day or two later, he'd turn around and sell it. He would do things like that. So it was the kind of stuff that my mom had done, but differently. My mom was very narcissistic and she did a lot of it, terrible things like that. But that's kind of what happens when you're raised by somebody like that. You end up marrying somebody like that too. You think is different, but they end up doing the same things. And
Yeah.
so I started to see the pattern and I started to realize my whole life had been a whole pattern of all of this being on the other end of abuse. And I was so sick of it. I literally sick of it. And I had about, gosh, between 5 and 8 different autoimmune things that I'd been diagnosed with that I no longer have a problem with anymore, just because I stopped all of that. I
Yeah.
left the church. It kind of snowballed. So I left the church, then I separated myself from my family and then my marriage. And, some people just like picture me with just like a match, just torching everything. We're, walking away. Picture it however you want. But what I was doing was I was starting to heal myself. And,
Jesus.
it was painful. It was the best thing I ever did for myself. And it was also the most painful thing I had ever experienced in my life.
Well, and with the way, at least the awareness I have of what came after extracting yourself, it sounds like it was actually physically dangerous.
It was physically dangerous. I actually ended up having a protection order against my husband, for a time. And my extended family had tried to take my children away from me after they lured me and invited me to a wedding, making me the matron of honor, putting my kids in the wedding. And then the day after the wedding, they tried to take my kids from me. So, yes, very dangerous, very serious. They think that they have to save the children, that the children are, they belong to God. They don't belong to me. Nothing belongs to you in this faith. It all belongs to God. So if you take something that they think belongs to God, they're going to try and take it back from you. They don't care about the law. They don't care that you had a restraining order against your ex-husband. They don't care that legally you have to keep your children with you. And they didn't care about that. So I actually was in a situation where a whole squad of police had to come and rescue my children. They had taken my children, put them in a car, said they were going to take them somewhere, and they had me surrounded. I don't know what their plan was for me, but their plan was for me. I knew went as far as me not ever seeing my kids again. And so I had to be rescued by police with guns drawn and everything. And they had to rescue us and put us in squad car and took us to the train station so we could get out of there. Uh, so yeah, when I say it was a cult, it was 100% a cult, and I 100% had to escape these people and had to stop all communication with these people. It traumatized my children. My children needed therapy for that. And it traumatized me, but also it made me smarter. It made me stronger. And I'm not going to put up with that kind of stuff anymore. It gave me a lot of experience. It turned me into an advocate, actually, for others. So sometimes you end up coming out on the other end even more powerful than you thought you ever could be. You reach a point where you were a slave to these people. I was a slave to these people. These people molested me. They hurt me. They lied to me. They stole from me. They tried to take my kids. And I used to be a servant to them, but I'm not anymore. And it feels really good.
First of all, I heard that the cops took you to the police station to get, or the cops took you to the train station to get you out of there. And I think that's kind of stupid because it's like you can see where the trains are going. But
No, they couldn't. They didn't know where we were going. They took us to a train station that was like not where we had planned to go. They took us to a completely different place. There was a whole plan about that too, where the cops were like, we're going to take you here because they won't, like, I don't know. I didn't know the area at all. Yeah, they were intelligent and they escorted us there.
What kind of protections were there from all of this, and how long ago was all of this?
It was a few years ago, and nothing actually ended up happening legally because the case actually got mislabeled as a verbal altercation instead of an attempted kidnapping. So somebody made a mistake when they filed it, and because I had called because these people had surrounded me, and I started feeling safe. They told me that they were taking my kids away from me, and they didn't give a reason why. And so I had to escape to the bathroom because they weren't letting me use the bathroom. They were blocking me from using the bathroom. But eventually I ended up going to the bathroom and locking myself in there. And I ultimately was able to call police, and they came.
Jeez.
And they thought that I was just being bullied. They thought that I was just being yelled at because this is what they heard was going on. But I was like, no, they're trying to take my kids. So I couldn't go after them for that. But we cut them off completely, and everybody in my town knows about it. The cops know about it. Even though nothing was legally filed, their lives are ruined. They're hiding on Facebook, they're hiding on social media. They don't want anybody to know what they did. They embarrassed themselves when they did that. They were caught. Everybody knows, and they're the worst thing that could ever happen to them, I think, is for them to have to walk around with everyone knowing what they did instead of being in jail, hiding. I think that's actually a worse punishment for them, to tell you the truth, that they have to walk around with that embarrassment.
Are they still all in that area as far as you know?
I know my niece was married to one of the people that was kind of the instigator of that. I know that she left and she divorced, but she was also a part of that. She was assisting them. So I don't really think that she's a safe person, but I do know that the whole group essentially started to disintegrate uh, because of the leader. Because it's like whenever they scapegoat someone, they have to find a new scapegoat. And I guess that ended up being my niece, and she ended up leaving too.
Jeez.
Yeah. So, over time you do see people that leave these situations, and you see them go off and get better. I'm starting to see some of my ex-pastoral wife friends leaving their marriages, and they look great. They have their own businesses because they were always good at making cookies. They were always good
Mhm.
at, doing all that stuff, and they were the real workers. They've been the real providers the whole time. The only thing their men did was get up in church on Sunday and lie to everyone. That's
Yeah.
how they made their
Mm.
living.
It's well, and that's the coming out on the other side is why I wanted to talk to you. I recently spoke with a woman on here named Isabella Young, who was married to a cult leader and
Mm.
believes that he murdered her son, and she's now left and is doing good things. But it's just like God,
Yeah.
when the police kind of exfilled you out of there, what kind of protections did they put in place? Or was there any, since it was never labeled correctly or actually taken care of legally?
There was minimal. I think just their trajectory was they were trying to figure out what was going on. They didn't know what their motive was, so they didn't know exactly how to protect us. They didn't know exactly how we were connected. It would have been a really long story. So they were just trying to get us out of there back home so we could go to my home state. Um, so basically they were trying to figure out what was happening. Why are you guys here? Blah, blah. It's like, we came here for a wedding. They invited us here. We were in the wedding. We were being housed. We were being, they and it ended up being this whole thing. I mean, I could tell you the whole story, but it would probably add another 30 minutes to it. Uh, but so they were trying to figure out what was going on. And I was like, well, it's been a while since I've seen some of these people. And he was like saying and then he told me, this is what he told me. He was telling me that that specific neighborhood, he gets called out for domestic violence issues all the time. And he's like, this is not a place. He's like, I can tell, seeing you with your girls, this is not a place for you guys. He's like, don't take this the wrong way. You do not belong in this place. This place is not safe. It's not a good place for you. And so I think that he was very familiar with these people and what was going on. So I think that he just, as long as we knew never to go back there, I think he knew if he got us out of there, I think we were going to be okay. Because I was already, nobody really knew my address. Nobody really knew all that stuff. When I left, I kept everything under wraps. I had reached out to my domestic violence advocacy center, which you should do if you're in a relationship you are afraid to get out of. Contact your local domestic violence resource center because they can help you with a plan. Even if they don't have a shelter for you, they can still help you. They helped me come up with a safety plan. They helped me find safe housing. Um, I had utilized them before. We were in a domestic violence safe house for me and my kids for over a year, hiding from an abuser that was stalking me. As
Right.
a separate incident, but
Okay.
also attached to the show, attached to my podcast show. I have never talked about it on my show, but I did have a stalker, harasser related to my show, and I actually was in a non-disclosed shelter for over a year with my kids.
How
Fancy
the hell? Well,
Jesus.
yeah, how fun. I mean, you still have your podcast,
Yeah, I
so
love my podcast, but
how
I
did
don't
that
have
get
regular
resolved?
episodes. I just kind of put episodes out as, as I have time for. But when I left my estranged family, I was looking for resources, to cope, like books and stuff like that. And I joined a support group. It was like, okay, we're on the road to healing now, right? And so I'm looking for resources, and most of what I found was from the perspective of an estranged parent,
Mhm.
which in some ways was helpful. In some ways, it gave me a perspective on what my parents might be thinking of me. So that was helpful. But there wasn't a whole lot out there from the a strange adult child's perspective. And so that's initially why I started the show, was to offer that perspective and to create a new resource that hadn't existed. There were no podcasts talking about estrangement at all. at the time. So I was the first to start talking about it as like a focused topic. So it's kind of a pioneer in that sense. I was like, either nobody's going to listen to it or everybody's going to listen to it. So, and it circulated pretty well in the beginning, and so well, in fact, that my own estranged family found the show. I changed my name for the show. Alexis Arralynn is not my given name. I figure it changed up really. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're like, that's a weird name. And that's like,
Yeah.
it's totally 100% made up by yours truly. But I changed my name not to hide, but to protect my family's identity. Because I was like, somebody's going to think my family's a piece of shit, and they're going to go after them. You don't know. I just wanted to protect their privacy. I didn't want them thinking I was trying to publicly smear them or anything like that. And I also wanted to protect myself. So I made this brand new show. Nobody knew about it. It's called When the Bell Breaks Podcast with Alexis Arralynn. What a weird name. And she talks about family estrangement stuff. And so I was doing that for about 6 months or so. And then lockdown happened. And all of a sudden, everybody's at home with nothing to do, and everyone's looking for new shows and podcasts. And my younger brother was like thinking, there's some estrangement in my family. I guess he was searching up some stuff for himself, some resources for himself to cope, and found started listening to my show and recognized my voice and was like, wait a minute.
Freaking crazy.
It was so, I'm honestly kind of proud of myself. I'm a little proud of myself for that. He did contact the show. He didn't contact me directly because I was estranged from him. But he did contact my at the time co-producer and was messaging him. He's sharing the family dirt and this isn't cool and everything. And he did tell my mother about it, but also told my mom not to listen. So I was like, don't tell her. If you're going to tell her not to listen, she's going to want to listen, you know? So, so that's kind of funny. It just kind of came full circle in less than a year of launching. I was like, I guess my podcast is reaching the right people.
It's a small world. And just, it is funny that
It's so funny.
that because it is, like this show covers anything and anything that I'm literally following curiosity. Whereas you're like, yeah, this is all about estrangement. He had to have been looking for that.
Yeah. Yeah. And my show is the only one out there talking about it. So, hey.
Wow.
I created a resource, and now people come on the show and they share the things that help them. And even though I'm not a therapist and my show is not a substitute for therapy, disclaimer, but we like to heal together on the show. So yeah, it's kind of cool. So I took some trauma and I turned it into something that is very healing. It's been very healing for me, hearing everyone's stories and how they've coped and managed things. But also, something I want people to know is that estrangement doesn't always have to last forever. Sometimes people reconnect, and people have reconnected through my show, which is actually really cool. And so I'm really proud of that. And so, I have a good reason to keep doing this, and it makes me feel good, and it's helping people. And yeah, I get a little bit of time to sit in my own pain and my own grief and share those types of things. It helps, but it's also given me an opportunity and the permission to move forward in my healing, that I don't have to be afraid of them. I don't have to live in fear all the time. I can set boundaries and I can do things to keep myself safe. And I'm allowed to heal. I'm allowed to be happy. I'm allowed to have good things for my family and for my life. I don't have to serve people without being paid. I have a housekeeping business that I've successfully run for the years, and it pays my bills. And these people have become my family. My clients are nice people. They treat me better than my family ever had. I have a very happy life with my kids and I now. And, but it came after a lot of hard work and a lot of heartache. But I kept going and I'm the type of person, I don't like to sit still for too long. So if I don't like something, I will walk through it as fast as I can.
Uh, yeah, but just those, I think on a couple dimensions, like what that's important when you can get to the point where you can talk about stuff like this,
Mhm.
whatever this being, whatever has been a very difficult thing for you in your life. That's a sign of where you've gotten, and also that opens doors for another, a further on healing and processing of it. And also, I think I've noticed it more so in writing than I have in talking about it, even though talking about it has been very powerful. I think writing has been more powerful in terms of like with my own stuff with suicide and stuff like that, and forcing you to think about it and analyze it deeper than you typically would in just sitting and thinking about it, because you're expressing your thoughts about it. And I think you
Right.
have to understand them on a deeper level. And it's very valuable. And then also other people hearing that facilitates more doors opening for listeners or readers, whatever the media is. And it's, it's valuable. It's something that I've strived for here too. And I totally, everything that you just said, just like nod my head the whole time, like check, check, check. Yeah, it is. And it's a beautiful thing. So that's one of the reasons that I wanted to talk to you. And that's also, I get people reaching out to come on the show who have just been through stuff and then haven't done anything afterwards. And it's sorry that you've been through it, but that's not what matters. What matters is what's done after it. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm very
Exactly.
selective of who I speak with on here because of that. When it comes to the subject matter being something that someone has experienced. So it's just, I think everything that you just said was awesome and great for people to hear. You said that you don't release regular episodes, but it is called When the Bow Breaks, correct?
Yeah. It's called When the Bow Breaks Podcast. You can find us at wtbbpod.com. And or you can find us we're on like Facebook and Instagram, and anywhere you listen to podcasts, we should be there. And if you find a platform that we're not there, let us know and we'll get there so that you can listen. I also have a YouTube channel that has all of the podcast episodes in addition to guest spots like this. That's on my YouTube channel, Alexis Arralynn. You can listen to more stuff there. I have other guest spots where I talk more about my religion, my experience in religion. I go into more depth about that, or like the narcissistic abuse I
Mhm.
experienced, or how cleaning and trauma are related. There's an episode about that too. So there's all kinds of good stuff in there.
Okay, awesome. And I'll have all that stuff linked, and trying to think of, I mean, I feel like you said the words that you said there to explain what the podcast has done for you is just, it's a perfect place to leave it, except for the fact that if you are one of Alexis's family members, don't reach out to her. Tell her that.
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm good. Just know that I'm good and I'm doing good. And I'll
Awesome.
can stay over there. Fail
Well,
and heal.
is there anything that I haven't covered here that?
I think maybe just one thing I want to say is that like if you feel like you're at it, like sometimes our wounds can be embarrassing when we walk around like we feel like we have a big gaping wound. And I just think that everybody is in different stages of healing. Everybody has wounds at different times. And so you can still heal, you can still move forward, you can still help other people heal. Just because you're wounded doesn't mean that you're defective. And that was something I struggled with. I kept waiting for myself to heal so I could make something of myself. But the healing process brought me there. I already am who I'm supposed to be. I don't have to become something different to please anybody. And I'm getting emotional because like I have that freedom now. I can be 100% myself in my house. I'm not getting yelled at. I'm not being told that I'm dressed wrong. I'm not being told to close my legs. I'm not being told that I'm a servant and that my feelings don't matter. I'm sitting in my own home and I'm talking about how to make yourself feel better and how to, overcome that and how you can laugh despite all of that. You can definitely like achieve this. But like I said, just keep going and just don't stop. Just keep, no matter how slow at healing you think you are, just keep going anyway. You'll get there. You may not reach a place where you're completely 100% healed, but you can definitely reach a point in your life where you're definitely 100% happy. I believe
And
that.
yeah, if you just heard that and that struck a chord with you, take them apples. Go back and listen to what she just said and listen to it again because
Yeah.
there's a lot of truth in there. And obviously I just, I feel like that's a great place to leave this for people to sit on and re-listen to a couple times. And I just thank you for all of this. You are so bubbly now and you sound very happy. And I have a hard time believing that you used to be that way. So it's nice to hear. And yeah, just thank you for being open about it all.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate being here. It's been fun.
Yeah, absolutely. It was my pleasure. So, and thanks everyone at home for listening to another episode of Going In Blind. This is another freaking heavy episode, which is what is like
Yeah.
keep doing on here. But I again, for all the reasons that I just said and that Alexis just said, I think these are very important to have. So, you may know someone who's in a manipulative situation, hopefully not as severe as this one, but I think in those circumstances, this is still a very valuable story for them to hear. So help them hear it. Send it around. And if you've been listening for a while, please take a second and leave a rating and review wherever you're listening. And if you would prefer to watch the show, you can do that now on YouTube. And sorry, I was kind of talking weird there because I'm trying to listen to my computer and talk at the same time. But so, yeah, I'll leave it at that. And thanks for listening again. I'll see you next week.